Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today on today's interview. I am Devette, Christian numerologist and relationship coach. As a spiritual entrepreneur, I believe that we all have really amazing and unique gifts to share with the world. So I am spotlighting a couple of really amazing people that you are going to love hearing from and getting their different perspectives and ideas and anything else that they'd love to share. So today I'm super excited. I'm interviewing Shawn Huber.
Huber, yep.
Huber? Okay, awesome. He is a mental mechanic, and I can't wait to hear more about that. You have a 5-day challenge going on that you're at the end of. Um, mindset high performance coach, that's awesome. I was going through your website and Facebook, and I'm completely fascinated about what you do. But I'd love to hear more about like who you are and what got you started in this.
Sure. So it started when I was about 12 years old. So I grew up in West Palm Beach, Florida. I was actually really young for the grade I was in. So I started school up in Massachusetts really young. So I started high school at 13. So I was short. I wanted to start exercising. So back then there weren't a lot of young people in the gym exercising. So my mom bought me a 3-month membership to see if I would like it. I got to ride my skateboard or my bike to the gym. So I'd go all the time. And back then there wasn't like, I had to get parent permission to go in there that young. There was all these older people. So I was exposed to people who weren't my parents or adults that were supervising me. I was in there working out with them. And you get a unique perspective when you're around older people. All my friends at that point forward were always older than I was. And I got to learn a lot from them. And it was all about like the repetitions, the sets, the form you're doing for the exercise, what cardiovascular workouts were.
Wow.
So I got intrigued by it and got in pretty good shape. And then they're like that's when supplements started kicking in, like the protein powders, metrics, the company came around back then.
Okay.
And this stuff was disgusting. But you would do everything to try to put on weight. And they had these mass builders with all this stuff. The thing that was unique about it was I also started looking into Eastern medicine. I was getting like strep throat and tonsillitis a lot. And I didn't know why, but it was when you get it and then they put you on antibiotics. I didn't realize that antibiotics didn't just kill the bad bacteria, it killed the good bacteria. But back then I was talking about probiotics. So I started doing some Eastern medicine, some herbs, and they would help me out. And as I kept exercising and doing activities in school, sports, I was a professional. I was a cheerleader in high school, which people are like, wow. It was for 15 years they had co-ed cheerleading, and we went to nationals and won nationals, which was really cool. So I got in the spotlight in front of crowds.
Okay.
And it's an energy that's like, wow, okay, this is cool. And then I also got to then teach younger guys and girls how to do co-ed cheerleading, the stunts and all that stuff, and tumbling. It was interesting to be a part of instructing people. So I'm like, okay, what do I want to do in college? They're like, well, I'm like physical therapist, but I didn't have a 4.0. I really didn't understand, like, college wasn't about your passion back then. It was about what are your grades, who wrote your letter, and how are you going to pay for school? I had no idea. I was the first person in my family to go to college.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So no one knew how to get, like, I took an SAT test. Like, what do you mean you take a class to study? Are you kidding? I didn't understand that. I'm like, okay, I'll just take it. So I go to a junior college, then I go to a 4-year university, and I didn't like the way it worked. It was all BS. It wasn't real. Like, I was working at the same time as going to college full time. I'm like, this is all theory based. And it's all mechanical, and I didn't care for it. So I went to massage therapy school instead.
Okay.
And the massage therapy school was 10 times harder than college. So from there, basically, I went and started doing massage, was working out all the time. And my clients were like, hey, we'd love to know about what you do for workouts. So I became a certified personal trainer.
Okay.
And what I started to find out was that people are motivated by different things and their body responds differently. Like I realized that emotions aren't just held in the brain, they're held in the body, and it can be from trauma. So I started to realize, like, well, you touch someone where they have tension, and that tension isn't necessarily from their brain. They remember it. Could be from an auto accident or some sexual assault. You don't know. So you have to ask a lot of questions. And that's where I started asking questions about, hey, what are you in here for? And a lot of times trainers would tell people what to do. Like someone would say, oh, I'm here to lose 10 pounds.
Right.
Like that's what everyone says. I'm like, and you know, there's more to it. But what they're actually saying is I want more confidence. So as personal training progressed, I'm like, I got to get more out of my clients. So I became a quote life coach back in the day.
Okay.
That was over 15 years ago. And
yeah,
what's life coaching? I said, well, it's asking people questions so they can come up with an answer that best suits them for where they're at right now. And as I kept coaching my personal training clients, they would come in on their own and they would start doing things that were far beyond the reason why they first came in. And they were, it wasn't a codependent relationship. Like if they stopped working with me, they would still come in the gym and feel comfortable. Where a lot of people are like, oh, I stopped with the trainer, it made me feel guilty not to work with them. So I don't want to come in. And I realized at the time, like, this is their safe space. I would never date anyone at the gym when I was single, because if it didn't work out, they would feel uncomfortable being there.
Yeah. Awkward.
So, yeah. So you make choices, and my clients were getting crazy results. Like I had one guy wanted to do one of those obstacle competition races, and he went from that to doing the 24-hour one, which is insane.
Oh, wow.
I had a client that she was wanting to get ready for her wedding, and she was also a soccer player. So not only did she lose 30 pounds, but she went on to win the Olympic gold medal in women's soccer for the United States.
Wow.
So it was interesting to see where the drive came from when you ask questions. Now, the format they gave you wasn't really following a lot. It was just asking questions. Then I got introduced to Brendan Burchard, and that's where the system started coming in play, which was interesting. So I got certified through high performance coaching.
Oh, awesome. And
that gave me a system that I take my clients through now. And then I'm like, okay, what's the next thing? And I'm hearing a lot about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but what about hypnosis? So I'm living in Clearwater, Florida now. I found a place online, but actually was in Clearwater. So I became certified during the start of COVID. And I added that into all these things that I'm doing. And I'm like, I'm into cars. And I'm like, okay, what is the thing about a mechanic with a car? They work on all these pieces, but without the right software, all those pieces don't matter anymore.
Right.
So I'm like, your physical health, what's composed of that, your hormones or supplements, your rest, sleeping, your caloric intake, the healthy foods, the different modalities for exercising, all these things come together. These are the parts, the mechanical parts that make the body and mind work together. So I came up with mental mechanic. Okay. So when you tune all these little foundational pieces together, people think clear. They're not worried. They're thinking in a positive sense. And what people see in front of them when they start in the program is not what they end up doing. It's 10 times bigger.
Wow.
And you get to sit there and nurture and pull something out from someone. So the hypnosis goes in, and if they're interested, it can unlock past trauma and work with that. It can also have someone in the present start to feel and wonder about their future. And we put that called dynamic hypnosis, and we work on that, because the reality of what we believe is what we're living.
Right.
How do you change that? It's not really changing that. It's the things that reinforce it. It's the praise we get. It's the, hey, I know someone just like you. It's all those things that people are looking for that make them move forward. But a lot of times as we're moving forward, we're coming from a place where we've been surrounded by people who don't think the way we are starting to think. And we're
Right.
asking for advice from people we should never be asking advice from. Don't ask advice from someone who's never owned a business about running a business.
Mhm.
They're a 9 to 5. Like, my parents have no idea what we do for work, but they do. They're like, oh, that's crazy. How do you do that? And when I was growing up, not having a quote, ever a real job, it was the successful kid would go to college, get a degree, get a job, have a family, and have money. And my kids goes to this school and they have this job. So the parent
Right.
was proud. My parents were like, I don't know what he does. And, and,
Yeah.
and when it came down to it, it's not their fault.
Mhm.
What it is, oh, it's okay that they don't know. I always would want them to know, but again, someone has to want to know something. So they'll ask me about
Yeah.
supplements and things, and they'll refer me to their friends. And it's funny because I'm like, that's not what I do anymore, but this is what I do now. And when you start to realize like the amount of successful people doing and working with people, what I do is incredible.
Yeah.
Professional athletes have 4 or 5 people helping them on their physicality and their recuperation and their time management. They have someone working on their finances. They're not doing all that by themselves. And it's interesting when people are starting to get better at something, they stop working with people that are supporting them. They think they can do it on their own. And you're going,
Right.
why? So that's why I wanted to keep, and I always keep adding to what I'm doing so I can receive more. I'm
Yeah.
always working with a coach myself,
Yeah.
because how would I expect someone to work with me if I'm not working with someone?
Exactly. And even coaches need coaches, right? I
Right.
mean, they
And
see the
all
blind
this,
spots.
right. And all this came from is like when I was doing the personal training in the best shape of my life, I got cancer.
Okay. Mhm.
And the crazy part is I knew something was off. And the client and friend of mine was a urologist. I'm like, hey, can you check this out? He's like, oh, it's probably you just hurt yourself working out. Don't worry about it. Schedule this. There's no rush. So I waited a year. It turned to come to find out after he did this quote surgery, it was cancer, and it was not just cancer, it was stage 3C, almost stage 4. So it was in my lymph nodes.
Oh, wow.
The work that I did from helping people helped me. The people I had connections with in holistic medicine as I was doing chemo, they're like, don't take these things, it's screwing up your blood work. When I was done, they're like, you have no scar tissue. What the heck happened? And then they wanted to know what I was doing because diet didn't matter to them. And then they're like, you'll never be able to have children. It makes you infertile because of the chemotherapy drugs. Well, my daughter's 12 years old now. So, and she was conceived
Yeah.
naturally. It's all a belief system. And if we listen to quote the experts, we stop listening to ourselves. That's an
Right.
internal voice we have to tune into. And that technically about 2 years, maybe almost a year and a half ago, I had a heart attack.
Oh,
Now, I eat healthy, I exercise. It could be from the chemotherapy, could have been from a couple of different things, but the doctor's like, I don't know what to tell you. But something didn't feel right that day. And I didn't have the normal symptoms. Like I had pain in my thumb and my back was tight, but I just worked out. But something was off. And so I had my wife, again, during COVID, check me in to the emergency room, and you can't go in. No one can with you.
oh my
You're by
goodness. And then
yourself.
during that time, yeah. I mean, oh,
You got a
wow.
mask on and all this stuff. And I go in, I'm like, man, I don't feel right. And they put me on an EKG and they're like, yeah, you're having a heart attack. And they come to find out I had 2 stents put in, and the Widowmaker was 99% blocked. But I listened to that
Wow.
internal voice. 48 hours later, I'm home. No heart damage. Now, they're going to
Incredible.
blame certain things that they look at, but I do a lot of alternative medicine. I'm not on any medication anymore, less than a year later. I was off of it, and I'm taking a bunch of holistic things, and I'm monitoring what I'm eating. I'm in better health now. I drink more water, and I can always do extra. I'd start qigong because of the energy
Right.
work and healing, and all these things that I do not only helped and help other people, but it helps me. And I think that's the interesting thing about when we're passionate about something, we're usually working on ourselves so much that we've come to find simpler ways to do things, better ways to do things, and we're passionate about doing it. And then we're like, hey, well, why couldn't I get paid to do this? And you come to find out, everyone's like, oh, do you follow this guy? Do you follow that guy? Do you follow this person? I'm like, well, no, let me check them out. And you're like, oh, these cool people are making millions of dollars doing the same thing. It's just they got their message out there.
Right.
And how do you want to get your message out there? There's many unique ways to do it, like we're doing right now. And I think life is about all these different turns and abilities to find the right people at the right time, notice what that is, and then do something about it. Because what happens to a lot of people, oh yeah. And I'm like, and like, oh, that's not for me. Or, well, yeah, I could. And that hesitation right there in life is what takes them out of the game. I think we all have the ability, and there's things around us constantly. Like when you're looking at a new car you want to buy, you start noticing on the road. It's just in your field of vision now. But when we're so focused on the negative things in life, when we're so focused on what's going wrong, we don't have that view of what actually around us could be helping us. And I think that's the biggest thing I do with that 5-day challenge I'm in right now, is doing what you're doing normally, becoming aware of it, and improving what you're doing, not adding anything to it. So for example, getting 30 more minutes more sleep, putting your phone down an hour to 30 minutes, or any electronic device, so your brain starts to slow down.
Right.
Making better choices on what you're already eating, like just make it a little healthier, not a lot.
Baby steps.
Right, because change can be overwhelming if we do too much. And that's what happens in January. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. They start off great, and then by February, oh, I screwed up, so they quit completely. I've got people who go through, when they work with me, they falter, but because they're being held accountable, they get back up, they keep going. It's not about, oh, you got knocked down. And people are like, oh, but you got back up. No, you have a reason to get back up. Like a lot of people don't get up because they know they're going to fall down again. They're like, I don't want to fall down anymore. But I'm like, it's not the falling down part. Like, I don't know if you've ever jumped on a trampoline and fell on it. It doesn't hurt. It's temporary. You may be jolted, but that jolt is so you start doing it better and better each time.
Right. And it's kind of part of the process, right? I mean, it's kind of,
but if you've never worked through it, that's the problem, is most people go halfway through the process and they freak out and they go back. It's like, you ever watch a squirrel run across the road, it's 3/4 away. Instead of finishing it, it turns around and goes back.
Right.
Like, why? Because if you don't know what it feels like to be successful, you don't know what it feels like.
Right.
And I made a post today about, it was about chocolate chip cookies.
I saw that. That was really cool. I saw that.
And it's the truth. We're all given the same recipe and the same amount of time usually, and sometimes there are different time constraints. But just do it the way we know is going to make this look and become successful. And then make your additions or subtractions or modifications after you know it works. But there's so many people trying to take shortcuts, try to do things my way. And you're like, but you've never done it to be successful. So if you've never done it, why do you think you're going to be successful? Or if you know that this works, why are you second guessing it, knowing that it works? Well, it worked for them. I'm like, no, it's worked for thousands of people they've done it with. Why? You're not the exception. People, sorry, we're not exceptional when it comes to standards. We all have fear. We all want to feel secure. We all want to feel loved. And we want to help other people in some way. When fear gets in the way and anger, that's the hesitation. That's the questioning. That's, oh, I don't know if I can invest in this right now. I'm like, when are you then? Eventually.
Yeah, if not now, when, right?
Eventually. I'm like, what's eventually? And you get to a point in life where you're like, what's a regret? You never hear people regretting that they bought things. What they regret is not having human experiences. They doubted something. They should have taken action. They should have been around family more. And there are a lot of people out there that I follow that they bring up interesting points where, how many times a year do you actually see your parents? Once, twice, 3 days? Okay, your parents were 75. What are the percentage that live past 85? Hardly any.
Right.
So you have 10 10 times the number, 6. So you have 60 more days to see your parents. It's less than 2 months. What? Well, it's a reality.
Yeah.
It's not now it's not coming down to the quantity of time anymore. It's the quality that you have with people.
Exactly.
Just because you're in their presence doesn't mean you're present. You know?
Right. Yeah, no, I get it. And yeah, I think quality, I mean, people are looking for so much quantity. You're spending so much time, but you're not really having that valuable shared, life together. And so you're missing a lot. I really like how you and I understand too, like that your parents sometimes don't understand like what you're up to. And I
Right.
think that, they get part of the system, and then it takes courage to actually step outside of that and follow your intuition, and actually pursue it. I love how you incorporate business into it also, because I firmly believe that how you do one thing, you do everything, right? What shows up in one area of your life shows up in all areas of your life. So by working on specific things, you're improving your overall life as a whole. And that's so powerful and so needed. I mean, people are so stuck in that system, and you know, getting out and getting up and following your unique message and intuition is really what the world needs. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, the thing that I've been really focusing on lately is something that I've thought about. Light and dark cannot hold the same space.
Right.
But what happens is you can't be angry and happy at the same time, right? There can be a blip where you go from one to the other. But the difference there is there's residual left. So say you're really ticked off, situation happened, and you're about to do a call and you need to be inspirational. That residual anger still, even when you switch to being happier, it's still there. And people can hear it in the back of your voice. And we call it the BS meter, that you're like, if that person's, oh yeah, everything's going great. You're like, no, it's not, because we can pick up those slight vibrations. So I'll have people like, they've told me this saved them tons of jobs, where they pause for a moment, they do a breathing exercise that I talk them through. And then I say, okay, who do you need to show up to be? So say you're going from working to home, stop in the driveway, do some breathing, 2 minutes. I mean, you can go longer if you want. And say, okay, how am I going to show up to be the best parent, the best spouse, partner, whatever?
Wow.
And then realize that the level of energy you're walking into, you have to be able to match. So if they're stressed out, come up a little bit, but not a lot, so you can start bringing them down. But if you're so low, it's such a difference that people are like, oh, what the heck? Oh, you had a great day, didn't you? And people get mad. Or if you're too high and they're too low, they're like, oh, why are you so happy?
Right.
And it's not a comparison thing like, oh, you don't understand how bad my day was. You walk in and you're like, hey, how are you? Tone of voice is so much more important than the actual word you're saying sometimes. I missed you today. How'd the day go? And if they start ranting about something negative, say, okay, you want to talk about that right now or a little bit later? You're giving them permission to either discuss it now, like, oh, and most guys are like, let me solve that. And they didn't say they wanted it solved.
Yeah.
So it takes time to learn this.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing is I'll have people, what kind of coaching? It's high performance. It means you're a high performer. There's the cage life, there's the comfortable life, and then there's the charged life, the high performer. The cage life is people complaining and bitching and moaning constantly, like, oh, you don't understand where I'm coming from. I'm like, no, you're right.
Want to.
Where are you coming from? And they'll say, I don't know. And then the comfortable life is the bills are paid, we're going on vacation, everything's good, but it's just good. It's not great. And that charged life is doing everything with intention to be better. And how you get there is you start doing the simple things that create the solid foundation to build your life. And you also have to realize you got to go inspect that foundation. It's those basic things you do every day to become better. And when you forget about the basics, you start going off and go, oh, I'm super successful. And you're like, wait a minute, I haven't scheduled time for my family. Why do you have to schedule time for your family? You're like, you don't understand. If I don't, I won't. And it's not like, okay, honey, it's 11:15. You and I have 45 minutes. That's not what we're talking about. Like people are like, oh, you're like, no, I'm preparing myself to know that, hey, Friday at 3:00, we're getting in the car. Everything's already set. I'm not 3:15, 3:45, 4:00. Oh, I'll be there. I'll be there. No, they know at 3 we're doing something cool. And when you make people a priority, they respect you. But the first thing you have to do is make yourself the priority. So without your health, you have no business.
Right.
And people well, that's being selfish. I'm like, you're correct. You have to be selfish with your own time, your energy, and the effort in which you're wanting to be better. And you have to allow the people around you to know your plan. Because without it, you're just assuming things, and you know what assuming does. So it's getting, I noticed this about you. Why do you keep picking on me? I'm just bringing it up. If you'd like to discuss certain things, like there's certain things between partners that maybe a third party should be someone that you should talk with. At the same time, I believe that people need to sit down with each other quarterly in relationships and, hey, this is going really well. This is what I'm working on. This is not going really well. How can I support you? How can you support me? How can we support each other? If we start not having that happen, then we're going to talk to someone because it's gone out of control. How did we get here? How did we get here? I don't know. Maybe because you don't talk. Or you start pushing each other's buttons. And it's okay to say, hey, what I meant to say, or what I really meant was this. Even if you know you weren't wrong, no one's winning. So it's explaining in more detail about why you're bringing up what you're bringing up, but also it may have been the inappropriate time. So I've always understood this with people is men want to be respected, then loved. Women want to be loved, then respected. And they're like, well, that sounds crazy. They both, I'm like, It's difficult for a guy talking to his buddies and his partner jumps in and says, no, that's not really how it happened. I'm like, does it really matter? Like,
Right.
Just go along with it. And again, knowing the love language of your partner is huge too. So what all this comes down to is learning how to listen and communicate with yourself first. So then the relationships around you, wherever they are, become much better and greater because you understand you and how to present you even better. And I think that's what people get lost in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because then you're not having to fight for someone to validate you. You're already clear, you're grounded, you're here. So whatever's going on outside of you, you're not making it about you. You know, I'm not enough, I'm not doing the right thing. Instead, you're like, okay, what's wrong with you? Or not wrong, but you know, what's going on with you? How can I support you? I like how you mentioned being intentional also. I think that was just brilliant, being able to, you know, drive up to home or wherever and just take 2 minutes to, what is my intention? Who do I get to be? Who do I need to be to walk into this space? Because, you know, maybe you just got out of a hectic business day and you lost money and this crashed and someone got fired. And now you're walking into home where it's a totally different atmosphere. You have your, you know, your wife and your child or your husband and your children or, you know, whoever's there. Right. It's shifting into that new environment and being supportive, being able to be. I also like how you know, came in with a very calm voice, because if someone's had a really bad day and they're really anxious about it, just that type of tonality just brings it down. It's just really calms it.
And again, powerful. The interesting thing about men and women, men don't hear the same frequency as women hear. So they don't hear when their voice is being sharp and cut off. And that's a true thing. Like 50% of men do not hear that tone. They don't. What do you mean I'm sounding irritating? I'm like, oh. And it's just, there are certain male characteristics that we want men to have. And we shouldn't be intimidated by them. And that's I do some groups where I have men in it, and men get to talk without being judged. And they need their own personal space.
Yeah.
Like women have their personal space, men need it too. And
Absolutely.
they don't show a weakness, they show a vulnerability around other guys that, hey, we're going through the same things. And the men that I've been coaching have never been coached before. They're like, oh, this is so cool. I never thought I would get this with a group of guys. We're not talking sports. We're not talking about, hanging out and drinking beers. We're talking about life. Like the fear of having children. What do I do with them? I'm like, listen, for 2 years, you're nothing. You're just a provider. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, yeah, you're cuddling the kid and stuff, but it's mom, not you. But you got to be there for them.
Yeah.
And then once the child turns 2, mom's going to get depressed in a way because that baby is going to want to be with dad because dad's the fun one.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? I'm like, it happens every time. It's just, and again, these are things that people need to be okay with. Women go through menopause, men go through menopause for men, like the same thing, but different variations of it. Women do postpartum because their hormones are shifting quickly. They also shift monthly. That's just what it is. But guys go so slow that they don't realize that their hormones have shifted and they're acting certain ways. They're more tired. They have more depression going on. Well, there's probably a hormone imbalance. Let's take a look. Well, my doctor said, I'm like, doctors are looking at minimums. I'm looking at optimization. So I have specialists I send my clients to for that, or people I know.
Okay.
And it's one of those things where the environmental impact of a lot of things around us are affecting us hormonally, and we don't really realize that. But if you look at our diet intake of how many calories we're taking, it's shocking that we're not actually eating more. We're just gaining more body fat because of stress. People are like, what? Well,
that makes sense.
You think you're getting crazy, but you're not. Like there's outside influences, and going through hypnosis, it showed me like watching certain things, listening to certain things will put you in a hypnotic state. And it's not good. So when it comes to like these things about certain things in the news, unless you're going to be running for office, you're never going to change someone's mind on something. So don't. There's no reason to argue certain things that you have a belief in. Now, if you've been called certain things and then it's come to find out that you were actually correct, don't expect an apology. But go with your gut feeling and be okay with discussing in a positive way the things that you're doing with other people, discussing it. And I'm bringing this up because this is my personal interaction. I wanted to help people who are going through cancer. So there are forums all over the internet that you can go on. I was in one and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I can't be here. The amount of negativity actually makes people feel more comfortable together. And I'm like, no. Why? How do you know that works? I'm like, it worked for me. That's all I'm saying. I know this worked for me. How do you know what you're talking about? I'm like, you have to take this. I'm like, no, I didn't. This is what I did. If you're interested, message me. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm saying if you're interested in looking, here's where you can start. So that's the thing about the differences where some people feel like, oh, you're manipulating people, or I'm like, no, I'm motivating and persuading someone. They come to me first after I present possibilities. And if they're interested in doing more, how can I do more is the question I'm listening from them. If I'm not here to convince anyone to do anything. That's the craziest thing in this world is there's so many people saying, well, my way is the right way. And it may be like every diet works, every workout program works. It just doesn't work for everyone. They'll work. And again, find out what works for you and then customize it after the fact. But don't think you got to be pigeonholed to do it the way everyone else is doing it, because we're not everyone else. We're unique and we're different, but we're also, like I said earlier, all the same.
And I think that's key. I mean, because people, they think everything's so cookie cutter. And because something worked for your friend or somebody else, you try on that diet or you try on that method and it doesn't work for you. And then they make it about themselves. What's wrong with me? Or they need someone like you who's going to sit down with them and ask them the questions and dig deeper. And it's kind of like peeling the onion, right? Like getting to the center of what's really the issue, like what's really what they really need, what emotions are holding in their body, what's holding them back. And you can do that by, your method, and peeling everything back to really help them find that unique and exact system that they need.
Right. And I want people
Okay.
to continue to grow after they've even worked with me. And there are a lot of shows that have been reality shows online and in the news and on TV that show the best of what someone became through a journey they went through, right? We'll just not naming the show, but weight loss shows in general. I know people personally who've been through them and won them. They do not look like they did when they won.
Mm-hmm.
So something worked, but what was the driving factor behind it? And then once you find out that it was negativity or manipulation, you're like, oh, no wonder they're not still there. Now, there are exceptions, but we don't see the follow-up usually of these weight loss shows 5 years, 10 years down the road. They very rarely don't work. And then when you start to know people in this industry, you realize that behind the scenes in a couple of these shows, they had hypnotherapists convincing people to do things way above and beyond their normal capacity, which caused injuries. And they were constantly working with these people because they tapped into the drive of that person mentally, didn't realize that they physically couldn't handle that and got tons of injuries. So it took them out of the game.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And again, our emotions, be it positive or negative, are reinforced by trauma. And it could be good trauma even. Trauma is just a shock. It's a lot at once.
Mm-hmm.
I do some work with some veterans who have PTSD to help prevent suicide. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting on how certain people are programmed to do certain things, but they're never deprogrammed to do better things. So there are certain times in our lives where we've been having to have a mindset to do a particular thing. But once that thing's done, we don't know how to deprogram that, or we haven't done that and we haven't got back to, quote, a baseline.
Right.
And so sometimes when we were younger, we were influenced by our parents or our education or our monetary backgrounds or ethnic backgrounds or religion. And we had to be a certain way at a certain time. But then when that went away, then we're like, don't know what to do next. So that's where it's fun to explore. Like, hey, those are your set of circumstances you had zero control over. Now you have control of your circumstances. What do you want to do? Mm-hmm. And it's finding out those different possibilities that people can do. They light up again for the first time. Mm-hmm. They're nervous. And I'm like, guess what? Fear is okay. Everyone who's successful is in a fear. It's what you do. It's if you don't, and I call it the what if. Okay. And they'll be like, well, what if this doesn't work? And what if that happens? I'm like, but what if it does work? And what if this happens? And they're like, oh, I said, so let's look at what the possibilities of the positive are. And yes, all those other things are possible. But if we always have a plan B or a plan C in place, we're never going to push through to see it happen. Exactly. And you see these huge breakthroughs that people are like, oh, look at all of a sudden they became successful. No, there was a ton of work behind that. But there are exceptions. And again, we're not talking about exceptions. We're talking about putting in consistent work, getting 1% better every day, and acknowledging that you're getting better, and be okay if you slide back to get back up and keep going. And I think that's where the accountability piece in groups or in whatever you want to call it, working with someone that's inspiring is where it needs to be at.
Awesome. I love that. So what is your ideal client?
Honestly, it's someone who's highly successful in business. Okay. At the same time, they've got the underlying thing, like a ticking time bomb, where I'll get to it eventually. Well, yeah, I go to some of my kids' games, or I do this, or I'm always there. They're making excuses for the things that are slipping away, that if they do slip away, they're actually dying inside. Like they're losing their family, they're losing their health. And the only thing that stops them is something tragic happening. And I'm like, listen, just because you got all the money in the world doesn't make you successful. On paper and in social media, you look great. But I notice when you're falling apart. I know your insecurities. I know how slight shifts can make a huge impact on you. And it's time to get real and realize that once these things are working as they should, you're going to be more successful in business. And they're like, how does that work? I said, trust me, you got to try. And trying is like picking a pen or a pen up, not. I'm like, invest in yourself. Watch what happens with these slight changes at first. You start to trust the process, and then it goes exponentially fast, and you'll be shocked at the outcome that you're actually going to receive on the back end of it. To a point where, yeah, I wouldn't have ever believed you that this was possible. I was like, that's why I didn't tell you what was possible. I need you to discover it. And I've worked with people who are just almost about to make it in business and tell me it's going to take them 7 years, and they do what they said in a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Like I had one client, 3 months, got engaged, got married, bought his house, bought his brand new car, took his business from 400 clients, barely making all his payroll. Now it's been 2 years, over 5,000 clients and a staff of 12.
Oh, wow.
But in 3 months, he did all that stuff. And he's like, dude, how did I get this done? I said, you didn't hesitate and you had fun doing it. Like my thing is, why are we waiting? Well, you got to date someone. Like, who says? If you know, you know.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point? And again, that's what life's about. And people are like, well, this and that. I said, you have no idea how much time you have on this planet. So I love working with people saying, hey, you're here. I know you're successful, but I also see all these other things. Let's start the process.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because they're afraid to share. They're really afraid. When you're at the top, there's very few people to talk to that are going to understand you. And that's where I really step in and help them out.
Gotcha. I love that. Yeah. They say it's lonely at the top, but it doesn't have to be, right?
No, it doesn't.
So, yeah. And sounds like you bring them quality of life. So they have all this success, and then they don't know what to do from that point to actually have that quality with their family and their life to where they're actually enjoying life. And when they're enjoying life, so is their family. Their family's going to have a better experience.
They're missing a lot of trust.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a sad thing. It's just a thing they're going through, and they'll be fine. And, with these challenges, I love people who've never heard about what I do, start them. Then they can make choices. I do group programs in the starting, but my one-on-ones are the higher end. And it's interesting to work with both, because I love working with beginners because they're open and honest. And I love working with people who've done it because they understand the processes and how it will help them. People in the middle are the most difficult.
Yeah.
Because they had a little bit of success, but then they doubt everyone else.
Yeah, they're in between. So
right.
Gotcha.
That's a two groups I love working with.
I love that. So anybody interested in working with you, where can they find you?
I'm on Facebook. My website is Shawn, SHAWNA as an apple, HUBER.com.
Okay.
And my email is structuredfreedom@gmail. That's the name of our company, Structured Freedom. So you have to have structure in your life to have the real freedom you want.
I love that. That's powerful.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the link when I upload this on YouTube as well. So I'll make it really easy. Yeah. Thank you so much. I feel like that was just all so insightful. I actually feel like a positive even shift, and just seeing that we're all in the same place, right? Like we all need that shift, and some more than others, but it's possible and it's available. And, I thank you for being that stand and taking that position for people that really want what's next and want that quality in their life, and, don't know where to go or what to do with it. So I encourage you to get a hold of Shawn if you want to upgrade your life. Maybe you have success and you think that you're at the top of the pyramid, but you're not realizing that there's so much more, and life can be so much more exciting and fulfilling than just financial success. So with that, I appreciate you. I thank you, and get a hold of Shawn or get a hold of me if you want to know more about him and how to reach out to him.
Thank you. I appreciate having me on.
Thank you.